Here I am, 2 days before Christmas, sitting in a bar, trying to make sense of it all. My wife Sue and I had a massive argument, all because I read adult stories online. It began innocently enough a few years back. After 7 years of marriage, the spark in our sex life had dimmed. Frustrated, I turned to erotic stories online. But little did I know, it would become an addiction, consuming my thoughts and straining my marriage. I'm not alone in this struggle. I've heard tales of marriages crumbling under the weight of similar issues. Tonight, I've arranged to meet with old friends to hear their stories. Brad and Mark are divorced, while Jim's marriage to an Asian woman he met overseas seems to be thriving. My own marriage seemed normal enough, with 2 kids and busy schedules leaving little time for intimacy. But the allure of these stories, with their tales of swapping spouses and wild parties, has left me questioning everything. Sue has given me an ultimatum: quit reading these stories or face divorce. I never intended for things to escalate like this. All I wanted was to spice up our sex life, not entertain thoughts of infidelity. But as I delved deeper into these stories, I found myself fantasizing about scenarios I never thought possible. The idea of watching Sue with another man, being in control of the situation, became a fixation. It's a dangerous game, one that blurs the lines between fantasy and reality. Yet, here I am, grappling with these forbidden desires and the consequences they may bring. The darker side of those stories was imagining Sue being unfaithful to me. Whenever I delved into those tales of cheating wives, I couldn't help but envision Sue in that role. In my fantasies, the narrative always ended with me discovering her infidelity and seeking revenge against both her and her lover. In those elaborate daydreams, I exacted brutal vengeance on countless imaginary paramours. The thought of being cuckolded filled me with rage and confusion. As I said, I'm really struggling to make sense of it all. When the guys arrived, we grabbed some beers and found a quiet corner booth away from the noise. "So, Bob, what's this about you wanting to hear about my divorce?" Brad asked. "Sue isn't messing around on you, is she?" "It's hard to believe, but shit happens." "That's exactly what happened to me," Mark chimed in. "My ex-wife found someone else, and I introduced them. Talk about a kick in the teeth." "No, Sue hasn't actually cheated, at least not in reality. It's all in my head. I've been immersing myself in these stories about unfaithful wives, and it's making me question everything about our relationship. Sue's had enough of my fantasies and gave me an ultimatum: either stop reading those damn stories or find somewhere else to do it," I explained. "Damn, Bob, that's pretty blunt. Are you really going to let her dictate what you can and can't read? If my wife tried pulling that, she'd be out on her ass." "I run my house," Jim remarked. "Brad, care to share your side of things and why you're now divorced?" I prompted. Brad's story was straightforward. He messed up. He and Amy tied the knot young, and for a while, things were good. But with Brad's job keeping him away from home, loneliness and temptation crept in during his travels. He found himself seeking solace in the arms of other women, convincing himself that it somehow strengthened his marriage. I thought I was doing a good job of keeping my infidelity under wraps until I was blindsided at the office with divorce papers. It had been 2 years since I started cheating on Amy. She had hired a private investigator, and I ended up footing the bill for his services. He trailed me off and on for about 2 months. I never saw it coming. It turns out, Amy received a call from a woman named Sheila, who had found my cell phone in a motel room I'd stayed in. She called our home number after finding my contact details on the phone. Sheila claimed to be a maid at the motel. Sheila's call raised Amy's suspicions, especially when she found out that no one by that name worked at the motel. Amy confronted me about it during the divorce hearing, mentioning how nervous I seemed when I told her about Sheila's call. That's when she decided to follow up with the motel herself. I deeply regret what I did to Amy. She deserved so much better. I miss my kids terribly, only seeing them every other weekend now that Amy's back on the dating scene. I find myself feeling jealous, realizing what I've lost. I'm not sure if Amy and I will ever reconcile. It's been over a year since the divorce, and the thrill of illicit affairs has lost its appeal. Now, what I miss the most is Amy. We've spent some time together with the kids, but she won't let me get close to her. I'm stuck paying alimony and child support for many years, all because I thought I could outsmart the consequences of cheating. Now, I'm paying the price. It sounds like you still have feelings for Amy, I remarked to Brad. That's the thing, I do. It took a divorce for me to realize it. Don't make the same mistake with Sue. If you truly love her, set aside your pride and consider her and the kids, Brad advised. What about you, Mark? You hinted at Marie's infidelity or your knowledge of it. Do you want to share? Mark's story. I'm the oldest among us and had been married the longest. After about 7 years, our sex life became dull. Marie, my wife, was quite adventurous before we got together, but we fell in love and tied the knot. However, Marie couldn't conceive, so we never had children to disrupt our sex life. Honestly, having kids wasn't a big deal to me. I wasn't exactly cut out for fatherhood. As our marriage progressed, we started discussing swinging and other similar activities. Just talking about it seemed to inject some excitement back into our sex life. At parties, we began experimenting, starting with innocent touches with other couples to gauge their reactions. When they reciprocated by touching Marie, it aroused me. We were venturing into a whole new realm of sexual exploration. Watching another man pleasure my wife while I did the same with his spouse was incredibly exhilarating. Far from feeling emasculated, I felt empowered. We started attending swinger parties, where I had encounters with women of various backgrounds. Marie and I weren't deceiving each other. We were fully aware of each other's activities. This went on for a couple of years, with us attending parties every couple of months and swapping with other couples in between. From the outset, we set ground rules. Both of us had to be comfortable with the swapping partners, and we wouldn't engage in extramarital affairs. I indulged in fantasies I'd harbored for years. Sexually, life couldn't have been better. Jim, can I tell them about us? What? You and Jim swapped? Mark asked. Sure, go ahead. I was going to bring it up later, Jim replied. Knowing that Jim's wife, Kim, is Asian, I broached the idea of swapping spouses. He chuckled, revealing that he and Kim had been engaging in shared intimacy since they met. Marie agreed to give it a try, seeing Jim as a suitable partner. We decided to make a proper night of it, taking our wives out for dinner and some dancing. Once we got on the dance floor, I couldn't resist putting my hands on Kim's tight little rear. Jim didn't mind. He knew it was meant as a compliment. None taken, Jim said, smiling. Glancing over at our booth, I saw Jim's hand slowly moving up Marie's thigh. Her reaction made it clear when he reached her most sensitive area. I knew Jim was pleasuring her with his fingers. I pointed it out to Kim, who grinned, and I proceeded to explore her youthful, petite figure, despite her being older. We booked a room with double beds, and I must have made love to Kim at least 3 times that night. I knew Marie had thoroughly exhausted Jim. After that, we met up with them 2 more times. Everything was going well until I broke one of my own rules: no singles or divorced partners. We preferred couples who were married so they had as much to lose as we did if things went awry. When I got a new boss, like most employees, I wanted to make a good impression. You all know Marie, she could charm just about anyone. My boss, Joe, invited us out to dinner. Marie looked stunning, as usual, and she indulged in her usual flirting, which she was adept at. However, she knew our rules. Joe seemed captivated by her, although he tried to conceal it. After dinner, I reminded Marie about our rule against getting involved with singles or divorced men. She assured me she understood and would stick to our agreement. She claimed she only teased Joe to help me out in the business. Work became busier, with Joe discussing the possibility of promoting me to assistant manager. He frequently inquired about Marie, and I always assured him she was doing well. One day, I asked Marie about attending another swingers party. She said she would think about it. The party was scheduled for the following Friday. Coincidentally, Joe asked me if I wanted to go to the home office that same Friday for a conference. He had other plans and needed someone to attend in his place. He said it was mandatory for someone from our office to go, and he was planning to send someone. He left the decision up to me. I would be leaving on Thursday and returning on Saturday, with all expenses covered. Without much thought, I agreed to go. When I told Marie, she seemed pleased and mentioned she wasn't really in the mood for a swingers gathering anyway. I left on Thursday after bidding my wife farewell. I parked at the airport since it would only be for 2 nights. I boarded the plane and flew to New York, where I stayed at a Holiday Inn. After checking in, I called Marie. We chatted briefly, and I promised to call her again on Friday. The conference was rather dull, but I managed to endure it. It was nice meeting some of the managers and upper-level bosses. They spoke highly of me, thanks to Joe's commendations, which boosted my confidence. After lunch, I returned to the Holiday Inn and went to the lounge. The women there caught my eye, but I couldn't tell if they were professionals or just looking for company. I felt a surge of arousal just looking at them. A couple of women approached me, with one even placing her hand on my thigh and inching her way toward my crotch. It would have been easy to take them up to my room, but I remembered my commitment to Marie. I didn't want to stray down the path of infidelity. I called Marie, and after several rings, she answered, sounding slightly breathless. "Why did it take you so long to pick up the phone?" I asked. "I was in the shower. I thought you'd be calling much later, so I wanted to get it out of the way," Marie replied. "Damn, I miss you. I wish I could be there with you right now. I'd eat your pussy and fuck you like there was no tomorrow," I said. "Baby, keep that promise in mind, and you can do it when you get home tomorrow. I have to go. I'm getting water all over the floor from the shower. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night." She hung up the phone, and I stood there wondering what was keeping me from going home tonight. I called the airport, and I could be on a flight for home in an hour. I gathered up my luggage and headed to the airport. When I arrived at our local airport, I thought about calling Marie but decided to surprise her. However, as you've probably guessed by now, I was the one in for a surprise. Pulling up in front of my apartment, I saw Joe's car in my driveway. I tried to come up with excuses for his presence until I unlocked my front door. All the lights were off except for our bedroom, illuminated by a lamp on the nightstand. As I approached the bedroom, a sense of dread washed over me. When I reached the doorway, I saw Marie on her hands and knees being fucked in the ass by Joe. I was furious. You have to understand, I'd seen her with many men before, but she wasn't cheating on me. This was different. My boss was cuckolding me. He turned to look at me as I entered, but before he could say anything, I punched him in the face, knocking him off Marie. Marie saw me and screamed, "No, Jim, I love him, please don't hurt him." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She loved him? That meant they must have been together before. I hit him again, then told Marie she had until morning to find another place to live. I wanted her out of my house and out of my life. I left and went to a nearby motel, got dead drunk, and didn't wake up until noon the next day. Remembering the events of the previous night, I headed home. Marie had taken many of her things. I cried. I really cared for her, but she broke the rules. Once she cheated on me, I knew I could never trust her again. She called later, asking when she could come get the rest of her things. I told her Sunday when I'd be gone. On Monday, one of the bosses from the home office was at work. He told me Joe had called him on Saturday and explained the situation. I was offered an assistant manager position at this office. Joe was transferring to another state, and Bill, the new manager, was taking over. Later, I found out Joe was related to the company president. He and Marie now live in Michigan. She filed for a dissolution, and I had no reason to argue with it. As far as I know, they're still living together. Bob, if you want my opinion, don't open a can of worms. Once it's open, you can't get the worms back in. Damn, Mark, I would never have thought you and Marie were like that. I knew she was a little wild, but I have to say you surprised me. Okay, Jim, it's up to you now. Apparently, you live a life similar to Mark's old life. Aren't you afraid it might end up the same as Mark's? I asked. Jim's story. Wow, guys, I'm sorry things didn't go well for you. Kim and I have an open marriage and an open relationship. You have to understand that I spent quite a few years in and around Asia. They think of sex quite differently there. At first, I was rather surprised that it was so open. Men selling their wives and brothers selling their sisters. If I'm going to tell you guys about my sex life, I need to know that it goes no further. Not even to your wife or ex-wife. Most people wouldn't understand my life with Kim. Jim, we all promise it won't leave this table. Is it that different than we might expect? Marks was pretty much out there, said Bob. Look, when I met Kim, she was somewhat of a prostitute. I paid her for sex for months. It was pretty cheap, sometimes she didn't even charge me, but I helped her family out anyway. Kim has 6 sisters and 3 brothers. They lived in a very poor part of the village, and the girls were prostitutes to help bring in money. I have had sex with all of Kim's sisters and even her mother. It's just the way it was. Eventually, it was Kim I wanted to be with most when I went to their home. Hell, she could make me come in mere minutes if she wanted to. I really had no one here back home, so when it was time for me to return to the U.S., I asked Kim to come with me. I had to pay a dowry to her dad. Hell, it was only $1,000. That was a lot of money for them all at one time. Kim has always said she loved me, but what is love? She probably said it to every guy she had sex with. I do know that she respected me and treated me great. It was enough for me. After we returned home, she always wanted to show me how grateful she was to me. It was usually in some form of sex. There is nothing that girl can't do. She's small but very agile. She can bend like a pretzel and fuck at the same time. After a while, I was missing being with some other women. I was used to a little variety. Kim speaks great English, and we get along great. We don't have any kids, which makes it a lot easier for our sexual relationships. Maybe one day she can stop taking the pill, and we can have a kid or 2, but right now we like the open sex life. She still has a few years left that she can have kids. She has told me she did want a couple, but not quite yet. It's surprising how many American guys want Asian pussy. When Kim and I go out, she is always hit on. Most of the time it is subtle, but other times they come right out and ask her for sex if I'm not there. I've kicked more than a few assholes thinking they could just take Kim. We may have a different kind of love, but she's still my wife and expects me to look after and protect her, which I do. Anyone touches her without her or my permission will be put in a hospital. I can guarantee you that. The first time I allowed another man to be with her was at a party. This guy's wife was stunning. Tall, with big boobs, long blonde hair, and incredibly sexy. She was quite different in appearance from Kim, who was petite and youthful looking. This guy couldn't stop admiring Kim's beauty. We started talking, and the 4 of us sat at the same table. I asked his wife to dance, and soon we were getting close on the dance floor. She mentioned that they had an open marriage, and her husband was attracted to Asian women. Later, I discussed with Kim if she was interested in the guy. She told me I should decide since I was her husband. That was her way of indicating she was okay with it. They invited us to their house, and it didn't take long for us to swap partners. That woman was amazing. I was used to Kim's petite body, so this experience was quite different. We spent the night exploring each other's spouses intimately. In the morning, we cleaned up and went home. I asked Kim if she enjoyed it, and she said she did. When I inquired if she wanted to do it again, she said yes, but only if I was on board. We prefer one-on-one encounters with other couples rather than swinger parties. This way, I feel more in control. We typically don't repeat with the same couple more than 3 times to avoid any strain on our relationship. If one of us starts developing feelings for someone else, we end it. We're not looking to jeopardize what we have. While I mentioned we have an open marriage, it's more about discussing other people or couples. Kim doesn't engage with anyone unless I'm present. There are too many risks out there, and I've shared her with a few guys, but she never does anything alone. You might wonder if I trust her after hearing Jim's story. I do, completely. We have a special bond, and she knows that any dishonesty would break it. She informs me if she's approached when she's out alone, whether shopping or getting her hair done. I genuinely trust her. If she has a sexual need, we address it together, but I'm the one in control. I've been with other women while traveling, and I always tell Kim about it when I return. I want her to know I'm honest with her. Our lifestyle might be hard for most people to understand, but there are many others out there with similar arrangements. Consider this: I can be with almost any woman whose husband is attracted to Asians. Believe me, there are plenty. Jim is a perfect example. Many men grow tired of the same partner after years of marriage. They seek something different, and that's where Kim and I fit in. It's one reason I keep myself in shape. I'm aware it's Kim who attracts the couples. Some guys think they can cheat behind their wives' backs and then get to be with Kim. It will never happen. I can say that a couple of wives needed to loosen up with some drinks before swapping. Reflecting on it, I realized some of the other marriages didn't last. It takes a unique bond to be part of the swapping scene while keeping your marriage intact. Kim and I have that bond. Will we continue swinging forever? Probably not. Once we start a family, the swapping will stop. But until then, we'll keep enjoying it. Hey Bob, I've seen Sue, and if she's up for it, I know where you can find some Asian companionship. I joked with Bob, unaware that soon after a swap, he and Sue would be heading for divorce. Bob, I've seen this kind of rough patch before. If you truly love Sue, I suggest you both sit down and have an honest conversation. There's a big difference between reading stories and indulging in wife-watching, swapping, and extramarital affairs. Fantasy versus reality. I can't imagine you standing by while someone else is with Sue. Just a thought, considering you have a family to think about. At least Jim was straightforward with me. Knowing Sue, I highly doubt she'd even entertain the idea. She's not the type to flirt or play around. I'm pretty confident about that. Thanks, guys, I've gained some insight. It really is true what they say, different strokes for different folks. Brad, Mark, I'm sorry things didn't work out. Hopefully, there are other opportunities out there for you. Jim, I wish you the best. Seems like you're living the average man's fantasy. The only issue is genuine love. I'm not sure if you'll ever find it. It's hard to put into words. It's the feeling I get when I'm happy to be home, seeing Sue smiling at me, or hearing the kids shouting, "Daddy's home." It's a wonderful feeling. I thanked my friends and headed home. As I walked in, Sue looked at me. Sue, we need to talk. I love you, truly. As I've told you countless times, I read those stories because our intimacy has been lacking. Bob, we're not intimate because you're indulging in those fantasies and masturbating. Do you really think I'd want to be intimate with you after that? If I stop reading those stories, do you think we could be together more often? I mean, more than once every few weeks. Bob, I love you, and I realize I've neglected you, and you've neglected me. Yes, we can make more time for each other. The last thing I want is to lose you. Understand, it's you I want, not other men. I saw you reading those wife-swapping stories and other things. It bothered me to think you'd want to watch me with someone else or need other women. I'm willing to try things with you, but only you. Just then, my kids entered the room, and I heard their familiar voices. Daddy's home. Where have you been, Daddy? Mommy said she didn't know and looked sad, my 6-year-old daughter said. Daddy had some things to think about. I was wondering if maybe you kids could convince Mommy to go see the Christmas lights tonight. Mommy, can we go, please? The kids, aged 6 and 5, were excited. Sue smiled at me. She knew I was making an effort to fix our lives. After all, Christmas was only 2 days away. She told the kids to get ready and put on their coats. Sue, I love you, and I want to be with you forever. I took her to the computer room and deleted the adult sites, one by one. Sure, I could always go back and reinstall them if I wanted to, but I wanted to show her I was serious about us giving it a real shot. We decided to visit West Virginia, just an hour and a half away, to see the beautiful Christmas display in the park. It's an annual tradition, drawing thousands of visitors each year. The kids were thrilled, and Sue seemed to be enjoying herself too. It felt like we were a family again. By the time we got home, it was late. I helped Sue tuck the kids into bed, and then I figured she'd be too tired for intimacy, so I just kissed her goodnight. "Oh no, buddy, you're not getting off that easy. I've been waiting all night for this," she said, closing our bedroom door and pulling the covers off me. I sleep in my underwear, and she quickly removed them. She was wearing a nightgown, but no panties. Straddling me, she took hold of my now erect cock and slowly lowered herself onto it. It felt amazing. She rode me, her movements becoming faster and more urgent. With each thrust, I could feel her getting hotter. I reached up and removed her nightgown, revealing her still lovely body despite having had 2 kids. "It feels incredible, Bob. Fuck me, baby. Drive that cock deep into me," she urged, her arousal evident in her words. I gripped her hips, meeting her thrusts with my own upward motion. Soon, her juices were coating my cock, and I couldn't hold back any longer. I released with a satisfying climax, knowing she could feel it. "That's it, baby, give it all to me. It feels so good," she moaned. As she climaxed, she collapsed onto my chest. We lay there for what felt like ages until I felt my cock slip out of her. I handed her the tissue box, and she took a handful. After cleaning up, she went to the bathroom while I put my underwear back on and got into bed. When she returned, she slid back into her nightgown without panties. Curious, I asked her why. She replied, "You might want to cuddle up to me, and I want to feel you against my ass." She was right. Sometime during the night, I found myself entering her from behind. She pushed her ass back, welcoming me in. It was incredible. That night changed everything for us. I missed the stories, but now I was experiencing the real thing with someone I loved. We discovered that better communication and expressing our feelings really helped. On New Year's Eve, we went out with some friends and were surprised to see Jim and Kim there. I guess their lifestyle works for them. Brad and Amy were also there, and they came over to chat with us. Brad mentioned that after our conversation, he went to see Amy and asked her out for New Year's. Surprisingly, she accepted. He's optimistic that they might reconcile eventually. He asked if they could join us, considering Sue and Amy were always close friends. However, Sue later confided in me that Amy was contemplating giving Brad another chance, but he would need to put in significant effort. Rebuilding trust is no easy feat. Later, Mark arrived with a woman we hadn't met before. It wasn't surprising when he joined Jim and Kim at their table. Sue, who knew all my friends well, expressed her distrust of Jim. She remarked on Jim and Kim's relationship, describing it as more akin to master and slave than love. Though I didn't voice it, I knew Sue had a keen sense of people. Despite any uncertainties, that night Sue and I danced and acted as though deeply in love, because we were. Our intimacy that night surpassed anything we'd experienced before. I was amazed when she performed oral sex on me, sober and willingly. After bringing her to climax with cunnilingus, she allowed me to anally penetrate her for only the second time in our marriage. It was evident that she was committed to making our marriage work, and I was equally invested. Our improved communication was the key. It was something we should have prioritized years ago. As for whether I still read stories online, the truth is Sue and I occasionally browse together after putting the kids to bed. We select stories she finds intriguing and read them together. Sometimes we even watch a porno movie before making love. What I've learned is that resolving conflicts requires honesty and communication between partners. If only more people took the time to talk, relationships would undoubtedly be stronger. Life is indeed good. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel not to miss new videos.